Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's NeoSystems CMMC Town Hall. Now I'd like to introduce your host, Ed Bassett from NeoSystems. Ed?
Hi, thanks, Don, and welcome everyone to our continuing series of Town Hall Ask Me Anything sessions on CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. My guest today is Regan Edens from the CMMC Accreditation Body Board of Directors. Would like to mention to the audience that we are recording these sessions as part of our community outreach to the Defense Industrial Base. Our focus on, as a service provider, our focus is on organizations that are seeking certification. So that's the primary audience here today. So audience members, if you do have questions during the session, please send those in on the Q&A feature within Zoom, and I will work in those questions as many as I can during our 30-minute session here today. I'll start with introduction of our guest, Regan Edens. So Regan has a distinguished career as an Army officer, followed by work as a DoD civilian in the intelligence community. He's now focused on transformation and innovation in the cybersecurity world as a co-founder and chief of transformation, security, and compliance at DTC Global. He also volunteers as a member of the board of directors on the CMMC accreditation body and is chairman of the standards committee and co-chair of the training committee. So Regan, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate it. Great to be back.
Appreciate you returning. I think you have not visited us since July, so a lot has changed. A lot of exciting developments have happened in the CMMC ecosystem since that time. Most notably, at least from our perspective, the assessor and registered practitioner training programs are underway and getting folks trained and aligned with CMMC. Would you like to just give us some of the latest news before we dive into some specific questions?
Yeah, so things have been going at lightning speed. July, it seems, we on the CMMC accreditation body sort of live in dog years, so that really does seem like a long time ago. We have been working on a whole host of things. The CMMC class 1, 2, and we are in the middle of 3, like today, taking a break during lunch to speak with you all, conducting the CMC level, the Provisional Assessors class, the 3rd class, and we have been working on a whole host of things. Lots of changes in the AB, working on developing and improving our engagement strategy within the defense industrial base, working on a variety of working in the joint working group with the PMO on the assessment guides, finalizing them up, and looking forward to getting them staffed and circulated and approved and out into the DIB. And we've been working on the infrastructure piece of developing the licensed training providers and licensed publishing partners in order to ensure that we get those relationships established and then get them really mobilized to develop to take this sort of incubation curriculum that we've developed out of hand and really to really develop that into a full-blown curriculum for the certified assessors out there after the provisional period. So mock assessments have been going on, and those have gone very well. And in the provisional period, we have really begun to mobilize, standing up the provisional assessors, as I mentioned, standing up the C3POs, putting them, and meeting all of the wickets and requirements associated with them to be ready to begin executing sometime after the provisional rule.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the provisional assessor program? So what is the intent of that? Why is it provisional? How does that become non-provisional later on? What's the steps
so there's sort of, informally, there's sort of 3 phases, right, of what we've been doing. So there's sort of the stand-up phase that we went through since January. Remember, we started out in January with a blank sheet of paper, and or metaphorically anyway, a blank sheet of paper, and with $0, an unfunded 501c3. So moving from sort of mobilizing the foundation, building out really the fundamentals on what does training look like, what does the assessment methodology look like, what do the standards and how do they apply inside of the environment. The DoD developed the assessment criteria and further develop the assessment guide. all of those things have sort of been in place and laid the foundation for the roles, the skill sets, the left and right limits with our code of conduct, with how provisional assessors and professionals within the CMMC ecosystem engage their requisite and respective audience, whether it be an OSC or whether it be an organization, trying to prepare for CMMC assessments or meet DFAR 7012 requirements in preparation for CMMC assessments. So all of those things sort of lay the foundation for the provisional program. And in the provisional program, the idea here is that it is sort of an incubator, right? So the idea is that we establish this initial training curriculum, which we've done, and then begin to develop, okay, what does that look like? How do we train the provisional assessors? Get feedback from them. That's really important during the provisional assessment period. I serve as one of 3 certified master instructors, I suppose, and during the provisional assessor course. And so we have expanded that course from 3 days to 4 days. And in my it's potential that could extend to a 5th day as well, if we end up doing classes 4 and 5. And I believe that we are. I don't know the dates right off the top of my head. So the reality, though, is that foundation really provides a feedback, an iterative feedback loop. So we immediately, we have high contact with our provisional assessors. So those are, so teaching them the content, walking through, listening to their questions, hearing, because in the provisional period, we really are. Remember that there's an enormity of depth and details that are really required to be an effective assessor. And so we've been in the advantage of really picking what we believe are some of the best provisional assessors because of their background, right? And some of them are, formal auditors with very long experience time and expertise. Many of them have DoD backgrounds and military backgrounds. Many of them have industrial, in different various assessment methodologies. So the idea was really to get a wide net and to be able to take their experience and leverage their experience with a really high touch environment that our provisional assessor training program is. I think that the power in that is getting that feedback and listening to their questions. We can continue to find and develop the curriculum. And in developing that curriculum, we can really establish a really solid baseline for what is needed for when the curriculum transitions into sort of normalized period, when our licensed publishing partners have are developing their curriculum. That curriculum is reviewed and certified and then pushed out to the licensed training providers. So for us, that provisional period is really about high iterative changes, some small, some big. And also when we begin the assessment period, we'll also take that approach and really vacuum and capture as many lessons learned in order to refine our process, but also to provide that feedback to the DoD PMO's office so that we can continue to field what are the questions that are coming up, where are some of the weaknesses in the materials that we have, how do we continue to expand the knowledge base of our assessors in the training program and through our curriculum so that we can meet those gaps that it's very difficult to anticipate. Nothing is going to be perfect, especially underneath the time compression that we faced and with the constraint of resources. So for us, having this provisional period is really all about feedback, and then incorporating that feedback as best as we can, as quickly as we can, because ultimately we want the DIB to win. We want the DIB to succeed. That we don't want to hide the questions of the test. This isn't a pop quiz. No one wants to play gotcha. Everyone wants to provide the defense industrial base a strong foundation for which to understand what they need to do, how to implement that, effective technologies and resources that, and be able to discern when they're making technology investments, what they should invest in and what they shouldn't, and also to be able to discern when they seek outside assistance from a third party, really who's giving them good information, and be able to discern how they invest their dollars in terms of ensuring that they're, at the end of the day, everyone succeeds through certification.
So let's project this forward, all this training activity. So our audience here is mostly organizations that are seeking certifications. Their interest is in, how do these programs that you're describing help them select partners with some confidence? So they're shopping, for service providers, consultants, assessors. How does the training fit into the overall sort of CMMC marketplace and basically your work to build confidence in that marketplace and make it less confusing for those people who are out there shopping for these services?
Yeah, so that's a really great point, Ed. In that, one of the major challenges that we faced, and when we started this, was that anyone could sort of hang a plank out and say, "Hey, look, I'm a CMMC expert, right?" Or DFAR 7012, we'll get you ready in 3 days, right? Those sorts of or hey, come secure our services and we will guarantee that you certify, right? So we even had some organizations out there already claiming to be able to certify organizations. So there's a real challenge here. And the real challenge here was, how do we normalize the marketplace just like any other marketplace, but in the time compression, it's very difficult for the OSC, that's the organization seeking certification. So it's very difficult for a company to decide who really knows what they're doing, right? So the idea in the CMMC marketplace was an understanding that we would normalize that through training and certification. So the idea here is that through the registered practitioner program, we would be able to provide organizations a solid foundation for which people inside the organization would have a baseline knowledge. The certified professionals or certified practitioners was the idea that an organization may not, or an individual as an outside consultant may not want to assess, but they certainly may want to consult, or an organization that had specific technologies that they thought would be useful within their potential customers would want to establish a solid baseline so that they can make sure that their technology and their capabilities align with CMMC requirements. So that's the idea that for the certified professionals, or certified practitioners rather. So the certified assessors was meant to differentiate those two groups from those professional auditors or assessors out there that were engaging working through the C3POs, and that they would conduct the idea was that they would conduct assessments really full time, or in requisite with whatever their business plan was. So the idea here is that establishing the CMMC marketplace, which will continue to grow and be more robust. And we apologize, that it's not where we want it to be. And I always have to remind everyone that because of the limited resources and the time compression, it's very difficult to do everything all at once, right? So, that you do things sort of an agile coding where you're doing things in sprints. And also it's very volatile, and in the sense that things are constantly changing. We just had the DoD FAQ come out today, which was very informative. And there's some subtle but very important changes in that FAQ. So things are evolving because the standards are being finalized. The assessment guide is being finalized, and and the interim rule has come into play as well. So all of these things really take into a part that the marketplace really helps you to discern who establish a baseline for who has knowledge about what they're doing, because at the end of the day, what's most important for us is that you're going to sink time, labor, technology investments that should last you at least 5 years in a forward-looking company, and those technology investments in time and labor are significant. They are not to be your average SMB is robbing Peter to pay Paul in order to get this done. So for us, we want to be able to enable you to make good judgments about what you buy, whom you get advice from, right? Because that's critical. Because at the end of the day, what you made investments in terms of technology, time, labor, and of course third-party assistance needs to get you certified. So if the certifier walks through, the assessor walks through the door, assesses you, and then in 100% conforming standards you fail, that is I consider that an abject failure. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that when you're looking back, you're that, well, our third party consultant told us to do this, well, this didn't meet the requirements and wasn't even close. So these sort of things we really want to avoid. So we want to be able to enable those organizations out there to make really good, to be able to make good judgments about what they're doing and whom they're engaging for advice, technology, services, and in order to make sure that they succeed.
I want to work in a couple of audience questions about the marketplace. So the first one is, when and where, I guess, will the list of provisional assessors and C3PAOs be made available? So is the intent to publish that at some point now that those folks have finished training?
Yeah. So there is. So the C3PAOs are going through their initial. We have a challenge. So the challenge is that the assessors, although they would be valuable, sort of in a sort of consultative way, to be able to for organizations to be able to bounce things off of them. But remember, for the code of ethical conduct, an assessor or a certified provisional assessor that consults or guides a company can't be the assessor, of course, that certifies them, right, or assesses them. So we've got a challenge here in that our C3PAOs need to go through their assessment period in order to be certified that they are good to go. So there's sort of a chicken and egg problem here in that we have certified provisional assessors, but we have C3PAOs out there that haven't yet completed the process. Okay. So I think when we get the C3PAOs through that process, we'll be able to marry those two together, because typically a certified assessor will align with an individual C3PAO, right? So what we want is that we want that marriage. So we don't want the C3PAO to be left out of the loop when in that relationship with of course the certified provisional assessors.
So the other question is, let's see if I can get to it here. Can defense industrial-based cybersecurity professionals attend the provisional training assessment program in order to gain insight and help their organization? So I guess kind of question is this really open to anyone? My understanding is that, the provisional program had very tight limits on the number of people and was maybe selectively chosen. So what's I guess it sounds like provisional assessor training is probably not an option for just sort of people in the DIB. What is their option right now?
Yeah, so during the professional period, provisional period, the idea was a couple things. One is that we wanted to, again, cast a very wide net, right? So we wanted to leverage people's background, because that's really important, because remember, we don't have a robust curriculum that's already been developed. And just for example, in this last provisional period, I added, okay, we need, I said to Ben and to Jeff, and Ben did an amazing job. Ben Schubinay has done an amazing job in setting up as committee chair, the training committee chair, and setting up this provisional assessor program. And both Chris Golden and Jeff Dalton have also done amazing jobs in developing Jeff in developing the assessment methodology, and of course all of them participating in the instructing. And I don't say that that's not empty praise. We're for the most part 99% of what we do is volunteer. And so, the reality is that that the enormity of the time to set this provisional assessor program up and develop all the curriculum and all of the slides was all unpaid. So, and which of course we're volunteers, and we're glad to do that. However, it really is an enormous amount of time. So the reality there is that as we've set up that program, we added like slides on DFARS, right? DFAR 7012, because now we know from the interim rule that DFAR 7012 is not going to be subsumed, it is going to coexist, right? With 7019, 7020, 7021. So the idea there is, okay, look, we need to establish a very strong baseline so that assessors are knowledgeable about DFAR 7012, and we don't take for granted that they already know this, right? So, and the reason for that is because the forever, or until they are commingled, those clauses are interdependent. They are interdependent. So we wanted to make sure, and we weren't sure whether or not the CMMC, the 7012 would be amended and then include, what we now know is 19, 20, 21, or whether it would coexist. So now that we know that, We wanted to establish that baseline of knowledge and teach provisional assessors about that, because ultimately what happens, what happens if they don't have that knowledge? I don't think that they'll be very effective assessors. So these sort of iterations are vital, have been absolutely critical to the overall curriculum development. And it is, again, it's not only designing the rocket ship in flight, it's actually assembling it in the air, right? And of course, we're doing it, we're doing it for, as volunteers. So all of these things really take a real play into the provisional program and the assessor program. So with the defense industrial base, we want that curriculum to be available, but what we want is we want a solid curriculum to be able to go out to the entire defense industrial base. So we were very selective on who we chose for that provisional program, but we are very anxious to be able to get out. Ben already has the licensed publishing partners and training providers already on track. So we're going to push out that curriculum. Oh, or I'm sorry, not that curriculum, but the requirements for that curriculum to them as quickly as possible, and hopefully in Q1 have the curriculum fully developed and trained and being able to teach the rest of the DIB. So that's really important to us.
That's really important to get the scale. So a couple of questions around how that, how we attract. One of the big challenges in cybersecurity is just a skill set shortage, right?
Yeah.
One of the audience questions are, what are the prerequisites for being an assessor? And a kind of related question is this something that is targeted towards, entry level folks that are coming new to the career field, or is it really focused more on people with already some experience in cybersecurity? Now, I mean, provisional notwithstanding, right? The provisional program was looking for experience, as you said, to get the feedback. But as we progress forward, are these training programs that you're describing a way for people to move into the cybersecurity field?
Okay, so that again, a really great question by the audience. So in my mind, and I'm going to tell you Regan's opinion. Okay, so in my mind, one of the major failures of DFAR 7012 is the fact that it always goes to the IT guys first, right? So the IT team receives it. They receive these requirements. They understand or have a baseline for engaging the NIST 800-171 requirements, right? And of course, again, the lateral practices over to the CMMC. But really, the organizational stakeholders have the dominant heavy lifting, because the organizational stakeholders that do the core business every day handle the CUI or FCI in the case with CMMC. So the idea there is that if, in my humble opinion, most of the organizations that have not engaged their business stakeholders have had very difficult time actually implementing and sustaining the requirements, right? So I sort of translate that over into the diversity of experience is been absolutely critical in my success, with DTC Global, in engaging and getting organizations organized and getting them on their way to be able to meet requirements. And then, of course, I've translated that experience, because it was necessary to do that, over to the CMMC AB. So in my mind's eye, Christy Heffman, which I'm sure she wouldn't mind me identifying her. She's a former Boeing exec. She has quality, a strong quality background as an exec, a strong IT background as an exec, right? And supply chain risk management. So my, and then of course, bringing in my humble opinion, the innate value of a woman's perspective as well, right? So several months ago, one of my industry working group members said, "Hey, Regan, we need to start a women's, industry working group." So we actually happen to have a working group that happens to be all women's. It's not officially designated as a women's industry working group, but these sort of individuals really, in my mind, balance the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Not just in terms of gender, of course, it really should be insignificant, but we do see things differently. And the idea, and that's really a positive and a powerful thing when we look at the diversity of the skill sets and the people that have those skill sets inside of the AB, the CMMC ecosystem. The powerful thing, though, is that we bring in quality, right? So I love quality, and you want to know why? Because quality people understand one thing, that I have to meet my customers' expectations, and I have to do it in a way that is profitable, and I have to do it in a way that's feasible and sustainable, or we don't have a business for very long. So I love when quality professionals out there either lead or co-lead implementation. It usually always succeeds. And so in my humble opinion, driving the organization is probably 60 to 70% of meeting and sustaining CMMC requirements, right? Because institutionalization by its very nature means that we're driving the practices or the controls all the way down appropriately to the user level. But the user is not a computer user or technology user. The computer user is a stakeholder because they're handling the CUI every single day in their workflow, right? And their work procedures. So in my mind's eye, when we engage quality and we engage the many organizations are including their ITAR or their compliance managers or persons, combined with the I would love to see the idea of a Kanban style CMMC system, right? Imagine combining the best practices for things like agile or other methodologies for organizational management, Six Sigma. I mean, I just love that idea. So the idea is that it's a holistic approach to the entire organization, and that means that CMMC, although cybersecurity is the core component, the reality is that the organization is a living, breathing thing filled up, and it's the culture that will do everything that will sustain the organization and make it succeed, or of course, is the cornerstone for breach and for nonconformity.
Well, that insight on quality side is really important. And I think as we talk to a lot of organizations that we're working with, many of them already have ISO 9000. And so that's the kind of the closest analog they have in terms of maturity of process and being able to demonstrate that to an external auditor. And so, we're building on a lot of that. We are coincidentally, we are doing the Kanban board thing. So
really,
and have that conversation offline.
I love it.
We just have a few minutes left. Let me shift gears. And first of all, there's so many audience questions that are really excellent that I'm not going to get to. I may ask you to come back on for another session and we'll just do the audience questions. But I want to squeeze in a couple more before we end today. One is I want to ask you about the assessment standard upon which the training you described is based. So the last time you were on this series, your advice was for us to be patient while the committee gets the standard right. And I have to tell you, as feedback, we have not been patient. The industry and those of us out there who are eager to see this have not been the least bit patient. And so what are the developments on the assessment standard, and as far as taking the feedback from the training experiences you've had and folding that into a high quality standard? How's that going? What's the process there?
Okay, so I'm going to I totally get that patience is difficult, right? So I totally get that. So here's what I'm going to say is that when we look at 7012 and we look at 7019, we look at 7020 and 21, all right? I'm a person that thinks in terms of vision and path forward, beginning with the end in mind. So what I'm going to tell you is that the foundation for what you should be doing right now should be 1-to-1 with NIST 800 171, R2, of course, and 171 Alpha. So it is vitally important that everyone on this broadcast knows who's sort of in the details of this, right? That you must meet the practice requirements or the controls underneath 171. You must meet them word for word with each of the assessment objectives. That is critical. Now, the assessment objectives that are listed in 171 Alpha for each individual practice or control are carried over word for word into the assessment guide, all right? So it's very, very critical that you understand that you're not just meeting just the, how I interpret sort of kabuki dance version of what I think that the control says, 3.1.2, right? That will only result in failure. You must understand that whether it's AC 1001 or 3.1.2, you're looking at each of the subsequent assessment objectives, and you can find those in NIST 800 171 Alpha. So please make sure that you are using those reference standards word for word, because they are carried over word for word into the assessment guide. Now, for the assessment guide in particular, this is a challenge. I'm not going to, my industry working group, as I told you before, Ed, spent over 4,000 hours, volunteer hours, developing to cover what we had thought would be the additional requirements and detail that are necessary to succeed. And in that process, we have engaged the joint working group within the underneath the tutelage of and participation of the PMO's office, and we've reconciled many of those changes. And so the assessments guides have been, I can tell you this, have been split into, they have been split now, but it's going to go through a staffing period. So they have been split between levels 1 and 3, which is a really good thing, because that will help the level 1 organizations not be confused about the requirements for level 3, and make sure that the level 3 organization out there knows very explicitly that they have to meet all the 130 requirements from level 1 to level 3. So we were concerned about that. So I applaud and praise the PMO for making that decision, because that was a really great decision. The second piece on that is that because the NIST 800-171 Alpha, the wording and the assessment objectives were carried over word for word, you can use that as a solid and absolute rock solid baseline. But remember, during the interim period, for the interim rule on the public comment period, the delta controls, if you will, the CMMC practices may change, and so there may be components of there that go away. There may be levels 4 and levels 5 may stay in part or stay in whole. We really don't know. So having the assessment guide and really having organizations out there focus on the delta controls and really spend time and attention of what they think is going to be compliant really isn't helpful. And in my humble opinion, to guard and be a good steward of the trust and the limited dollars that small and mid-sized businesses have, I've advocated that we want to make sure that those controls are going to stay and what the wording is going to be until we sort of release them out into the wild, right? So, but because of the 7012 and the 19 and 20 and 21 interim rules, if you use the 171, you can't R2, you can't go wrong. If you use the 171 Alpha, you absolutely cannot go wrong, because that covers you for D4 7012, and of course to be ready for SPRS, the supply chain supplier. The DCMA, which is described in 19, 20, and 21. So to be ready for those, so you use the DCMA and DIBCAC assessment methodology for a baseline assessment. Using that 171, 171 Alpha, all of those things will prepare you for, remember, there's a 92% overlap between level 3 and NIST 800-171. There's a 92% coverage overlap. So those delta requirements, those 20 requirements are still but changing and not quite set. So stay focused, stay laser focused on those 110, and then you should be, as an organization, be able to pick up those additional 20 requirements for CMC level 3 organization very easily.
I appreciate the emphasis on the 800-171 and the Alpha, because I think there were, like you mentioned earlier, there were those of us who thought maybe that was going to be subsumed or somehow changed by the DFARS rules. Now that that's out and we see that that is going to remain in place, and in fact really is increased emphasis on getting that compliance figured out and reported to the DoD with the reporting requirement is yeah, I think that helps to really focus that in. We're kind of at the end of our time. I want to ask one kind of wrap-up question for you here today. So the AB, first of all, the progress has been astounding to watch. As you mentioned, it's all been a volunteer effort, and it's been a lot of progress. But I'm sure you're absolutely inundated with input, suggestions, some of it constructive, some of it perhaps angry, some of it high quality, some of it low quality. We're impressed with the fact that you're listening hard to those inputs. So to wrap things up for us, what can you pull out as kind of the number one suggestion that has come into the CMMC AB that has changed thinking or improved things? An example where the input from industry has made a significant difference in the shape of the program.
Yeah, I'm pretty stretched pretty thin, I'm not gonna lie. But the reality though is that people will often reach out to me over LinkedIn, and if with questions, and that happens all the time. So if you're interested in the standards and standards management or aspects of the program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me over LinkedIn. And the reality is I engage people who are critical of the AB, and the reality is, the reason why I engage them privately is because I really want to, when I have time, I really want to have that listening ear. Now, I don't think that the sort of the public trolling and all of that sort of thing, I don't think that that's helpful. But what I do is I really think that have a listening ear to honest criticism makes, I've told every single organization they've either led or been a part of that both locks keep honest men honest, right? So accountability is important for everyone. And criticism is a tool to strengthen the sword and the shield, right? This is how we go stronger, is by listening and with a discerning ear and incorporating that guidance into what we do, right? And how we approach things, because it's impossible, because we are in the middle of the hurricane, and I promise you, we're giving this 110%. Every single person on the AB or that has served on the AB can validate that. But at the end of the day, what we try to incorporate is absolutely critical. So what your criticism is important. It refines. It is the hammer and the anvil. It is the fire in the ice that makes the sword and the shield stronger. So you need to keep that criticism flowing, positive and negative. Both of those things are as equally as important. Make sure that the feedback is provided to us. There are lots of different ways to contact us on the AB website, so that's critical. But what we've done principally is really taking an honest assessment of this radical adventure that we've been a part of since January, and it has been I've been at the cutting edge of DoD my entire adult life, and I'm the guy that they used to call to do the impossible stuff, the really difficult hard target missions for technology or whatever the mission accomplishment was. And it is by nature that I am like a moth to a flame on those challenges, right? This is the hardest thing I have ever done. This is the most complex. This is absolutely the objectively the most difficult as far as the stakeholders' participation, the trust and the relationship that we're building with the PMO as the program management office. The fact that it's only manned by three individuals who are doing a remarkable job underneath enormous pressure, and of course the 10 to 15 of us on the industry or the accreditation body board. So that all being said and caveated, this is having your criticism being fair criticism is absolutely warranted. So taking that criticism in, listening to that criticism, I think you're going to hear and see by action, not by words, that over the next few months, we are going to absolutely implement, transparency, DIB engagement, improve our messaging so we can continue to do, like today, I had a provisional assessor class. I broke from the class to come out here and make sure that we get our message out, right? And that everyone is aware of these subtle but very important things that are going on both behind the scenes and also in the public eye. So all of these things are really critical to making sure that you succeed. I joined this effort. I joined this mission to do two fundamental things: to secure our national security interest that's been egregiously at risk the last decade, egregiously at risk, and that has to come to an end. The second thing is to be able to do that in a way that doesn't break our small and mid-sized businesses, and that actually can, over the long run, can improve and secure our future, both through industry and both through the individuals. And some of our industries are coming back, like the steel industry and other things, that we don't want to break it while we're trying to secure it. So how to do it in a way that people understand the requirements, that they understand what they should invest in and what they should not invest in, and that they make that they're able to exercise with good judgments those investments in order to prepare to meet requirements. Because ultimately, this is not hyperbole. This is not compliance for compliance sake. We literally have the future of our country at risk if we do not do this, and we do not do it in a way that is comprehensive, sustainable, and understandable throughout the entire defense industrial base. So that's why I'm here, and that's in our hearts as members of the accreditation body. That's the reason we volunteer to do this. And if it weren't, I promise you, there's no other reason to do it. So thank you for that criticism. Thank you for both positive and negative, of course. And thank you for accountability, because we need it, right? We need it to stay on track. We need azimuth correction, and any person who doesn't embrace accountability is probably not who you want to lead. So I personally am grateful for that, and we need it. So thank you for that, and we look forward to continue to serve and continue to move the CMMC mission forward.
Well, thank you, Regan. I mean, we all share that same sense of mission. I think everybody that's here in the audience, and certainly those of us at NeoSystems, take those two mission objectives that you mentioned very seriously. And so, you know, I think it's all about us all working together to make our nation more successful. So thank you for your time today. I want to say to the audience, thank you as well for joining. And thank you for all the great questions. I would like to try to put together maybe a follow-on with Regan, where we look just at the audience questions. I'll sort them out a little bit, and maybe do another session on some of those things that we didn't get to today. I want to mention to people we have this series of town hall meetings we're doing on a weekly basis. Next session is going to be Wednesday, November 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will be taking a break the following week to observe Veterans Day. Also want to put in a quick mention of upcoming event on November 17th. We have the Cybersecurity Summit that's sponsored by NeoSystems in conjunction with Federal Publication Seminars. It's a full day on cybersecurity topics, CMMC being one of them, but covering broad range of cybersecurity topics with some really excellent panelists. Be sure to put that on your calendars for November 17th. If you need details on that, go to our website, neosystemscorp.com, and all the details are there under the events page. So thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ed.